An old man sits on the desert floor, his hands stained deep red with the blood of 5 different animals, sand between the carcasses. The birds of prey keep circling, drawn by the overwhelming scent of death. He keeps driving, so God promises to rip their city apart and leave their corpses to the scavengers. The Babylonians return. The walls fall. The elites are slaughtered in the streets. The terms of the covenant are executed exactly as the ritual demanded. God does not play games with the pieces. If you step between the halves, you forfeit your life the moment you fail. Now, take that absolute, terrifying legal reality. Back to the desert in Genesis 15. Abram is paralyzed in the crushing dark. The carcasses are waiting. The corridor of blood is open. The terms of the ancient Near East demand that both parties walk the aisle. Both parties must invoke the curse. If Abram is going to secure God's promise, Abram has to step between the butchered animals and stake his own life on his future obedience. But as the darkness peaks, Abram does not stand up. He cannot stand up. God keeps him pinned to the freezing sand. Something else steps into the blood. We are a species that has forgotten the weight of our own words. When we break a commitment today, there is no blood on the floor. There is usually just the soft tap of a finger against a glowing piece of glass. We send a quick, carefully worded text message to cancel an obligation, them back, swinging his arms in the fading light. Fighting off the scavengers with whatever strength he has left, we draft a polite, multi-paragraph email to back out of a financial deal. If a mortgage becomes too heavy to carry, we file bankruptcy paperwork. If a partnership fractures, we hire attorneys to negotiate the dissolution. We have engineered an entire culture where breaking your word is practically frictionless. Because of this, we read the Bible with a massive cognitive deficit. We see the word covenant, and we subconsciously map our flimsy, civilized modern promises onto the ancient text. We assume God is simply giving Abram a divine guarantee. We assume a covenant is just God saying, "I give you my word," while we nod in agreement. We want the spiritual security of the text without the butcher's bill. We want a God who signs paperwork, not a God who walks through severed flesh. But the ancient mind understood a terrifying reality that our modern culture actively avoids. They knew that human words evaporate into the hot wind. They knew that human intentions are as fragile as dry grass. If an agreement was going to hold the actual weight of survival, it had to cost something physically, immediately. The sharp scent of wet iron had to hang heavily in the air. The dry dirt had to turn into dark, sticky mud beneath their leather sandals. A biblical covenant is not a declaration of your best intentions. It is the unconditional surrender of your future options. When we ask God to keep His promises to us, we rarely consider the legal framework. Most people read this chapter and assume it is just primitive worship, a bizarre, ancient sacrifice that belongs securely locked, required to make those promises permanently binding. If God had simply spoken a blessing over Abram and walked away, it would have been a beautiful intention. But by demanding the livestock, by participating in the carrot beareth, by choosing the brutal language of the blade, God was submitting His own character to the highest, most lethal legal standard of the ancient world. And He was doing it entirely alone. Look back at the dark desert floor. In every other ancient Near Eastern treaty, both the lesser king and the greater king would walk the bloody aisle. Both parties had to stake their lives on their future obedience. Both had to invoke the curse. But in the pitch black of Genesis 15, God puts the human to sleep. A smoking firepot and a flaming torch suddenly appear out of the crushing darkness, and they pass between the butchered halves while Abram remains completely paralyzed on the ground. God takes both sides of the covenantal curse upon Himself. He is legally declaring that if he fails to keep his promise, his own existence will be torn apart. But he is also declaring that if Abram's descendants fail to keep the covenant, the penalty of the blade will not fall on them. The penalty will still fall on God. That is the breathtaking scandal of the Old Testament. God signs a literal death warrant for human failure, away in the Bronze Age. We gloss over the gore, We read the word covenant in our English Bibles. And he walks the aisle of blood so that we wouldn't have to. And centuries later, that ancient, bloody warrant finally came due. 13 men sit on floor cushions around a low table in Jerusalem. The air, in the cramped upper room, is thick with the sharp smell of roasted lamb and bitter herbs. The city outside is buzzing with Passover crowds, but inside this room, the atmosphere is heavy with impending grief. Jesus reaches across the table. He picks up a piece of flat, dry, unleavened bread. You can hear the brittle crack as he snaps it in half. He holds the broken pieces out to his friends. "This is my body," he says, "given for you." Then he takes a heavy cup of dark, red wine. He lifts it in the dim, flickering candlelight. "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." He uses the word covenant, but he does not bring out a parchment. He does not ask for their signatures. He is invoking the blade. He is reaching all the way back across 2,000 years of history. Back to the freezing desert floor in Genesis 15. We instantly project our civilized world onto the text. We think of a covenant as a formal agreement, a spiritual handshake. He is standing in the place of the smoking firepot. He is announcing that the ancient warrant has finally come due. Hours later, the sky over Golgotha turns pitch black in the middle of the afternoon. It is the exact same terrifying, suffocating darkness that fell on Abram, the exact same paralyzing dread. A man is laid on rough, splintered wood. Iron spikes are driven through his wrists, shattering bone and severing nerve. The wood is hoisted up. It drops into a rocky hole in the ground with a violent, sickening thud. The cross stands exactly like an altar in the dirt. Blood drips from his hands, from his torn back, soaking the dry Judean soil. A Roman soldier steps forward. He raises a heavy iron spear. He thrusts it upward, driving the blade deep into the side of the crucified God. Water and blood pour out. The body is pierced. The flesh is violently divided. At that exact moment, miles away in the city, the massive, heavy veil in the temple violently tears in two, from top to bottom. It splits exactly like the heifer. It splits exactly like the ram. It falls open, creating a narrow, open aisle directly into the Holy of Holies. The cross is not a Roman execution. It is a contractual obligation. God made a promise to a paralyzed man in the desert, a divine guarantee written on crisp, heavily watermarked paper, signed in ink at the bottom by both parties, and filed. God swore that if humanity ever broke the covenant, God himself would take the curse of the severed animals. Humanity broke the covenant before the ink was even dry on the tablets of Sinai. We broke it in the wilderness. We broke it in the promised land. We broke it in the exile. And now, the creator of the universe is hanging on a Roman cross, paying the butcher's bill. The flesh is divided. The blood hits the ground. The covenant is cut. The darkness peaks. The lungs empty. The head bows. But the payment of this terrible price creates a massive theological earthquake. Because what happens to a legal agreement when the one who made the promise dies to fulfill it? Look at the strict legal mechanics of a death. When a man dies, his accounts freeze. His earthly debts are finalized. His active contracts are forcibly closed. You cannot sue a corpse. You cannot extract labor from a tomb. You cannot collect penalty fees from a grave. The heavy wooden gavel drops in the courtroom. The ink dries on the final ledger. The law has absolutely no more jurisdiction. This legal reality changes everything about how we understand the cross. We treat divine forgiveness like a cosmic apology. We treat it like a judge, simply deciding to let a criminal walk free, away in a drawer for safekeeping. And a covenant is an agreement. Yes, but if you look closer at the dirt, we think God looks down at our broken promises, shrugs his shoulders, and decides to look the other way. We assume he just sweeps our daily betrayals under the rug. But the God of the Bible does not ignore the law. He satisfies the law. The terms were permanently set in the freezing desert. The penalty for betrayal was always death. The curse of the Carat beareth was absolute. Every broken vow, every shattered commandment, every selfish betrayal, every time humanity walked away from the covenant, the curse demanded its blood. The ancient scales demanded a life. The severed animals demanded their violent payment. The metallic taste of a broken oath hung in the air for thousands of years. God did not lower the standard to save us. He took the blade. Forgiveness is not a legal loophole. It is a bloody receipt. It is the terrifying reality that the Creator held himself to his own impossible standard. He did not bend the rules. He let the rules break him. He let the curse completely empty his lungs. He let the darkness crush his chest. The price of the pieces was paid in full. When you truly grasp this, it completely destroys every modern concept of religious performance. You cannot earn your way out of a death penalty. You cannot negotiate with a falling axe. You cannot offer good behavior to a legal code that explicitly demands an execution. At the severed carcasses, at the exact Hebrew vocabulary operating beneath the surface of the text, you start to realize the debt was not deferred. It was absorbed. The curse was not ignored. It was exhausted. The covenant was not abandoned. It was fulfilled. We are no longer living under the constant, hovering threat of the knife. We are living on the other side of the slaughter. The terrifying dread that fell on Abram has been permanently lifted off humanity. The narrow aisle of blood has finally been walked to the very end. The ancient contract has been executed. But a fulfilled contract is not the end of the narrative, because when a debt is entirely cleared, a new reality begins. Abram waited in the paralyzing dark, and the Creator walked the bloody aisle for him. The wealthy elites of Judah broke their word, and the curse of the calf consumed their city. A smoking firepot passed between the severed halves, and a divine death warrant was permanently signed. A savior broke unleavened bread in an upper room, and the ancient debt finally came due. A Roman spear pierced a crucified side, and the flesh of God was violently divided. A heavy temple veil tore from top to bottom, and the aisle of blood was finished forever. One blade, one promise, one covenant cut in the dark. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the paralyzing sleep. The Tardama. Abram could not stand up. He could not negotiate his terms. He could not promise to try harder next time. Modern definition completely misses the absolute terror of the moment. A biblical covenant is not a promise you make. He was pinned to the freezing desert dirt, completely helpless. While God took the entire terrifying burden of the agreement upon his own shoulders, if you are in a season where you feel like you constantly fail to hold up your end of the bargain, if you are exhausted from trying to negotiate your worth with a God you assume is holding a pen and waiting for your signature, look back at the sand. The covenant does not depend on your flawless performance. It never did. The penalty has already fallen. The cross absorbed the blade. And may the God who walked the terrifying aisle alone, who took the curse so you could take the promise, it give you the profound rest of a debt you no longer have to pay. If this reached something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted by religious performance and needs to know the contract is already fulfilled. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. It is a death you step into. To understand why this man is guarding mutilated animals in the dark, to you, the sun is dropping fast behind the rugged hills of Canaan, throwing long, jagged shadows across the sand, have to strip away centuries of sterile, Western legal definitions. You have to step out of the air-conditioned modern courtroom and walk into the dust of the ancient Near East. The word we casually translate as covenant holds a terrifying secret in its root. It is a secret that changes how you read every guarantee God ever made. And to uncover it, we have to look at how a deal was actually struck in a world before signatures ever existed. We live in a world obsessed with the escape clause. When two people or two corporations sit down to finalize a major agreement today, they sit in climate-controlled rooms across from each other at polished mahogany tables. They slide thick stacks of crisp, white paper across the wood. They hold smooth plastic pens scratching their signatures in blue or black ink on the final dotted line. If the agreement collapses, if one party fails to deliver, the paper goes to a courthouse with cold marble floors. A judge in a black robe reviews the ink, and a penalty is negotiated. The worst-case scenario is a loss of capital, a loss of assets, or a loss of reputation. We have built our entire legal infrastructure around the underlying assumption that people will eventually break their word. We need a clean, civilized, bloodless way to manage the fallout. The air is thick, suffocating with the metallic smell of slaughter and torn flesh. He is constantly swatting away vultures. A modern contract is not a binding of two lives. It is a carefully managed risk assessment. But if you rewind history 3,000 or 4,000 years, stepping into the tribal cultures of Mesopotamia and the ancient Near East, that entire civilized framework vanishes. There are no mahogany tables in the desert. There are no watermarked papers, no pens, no appellate courts to hear a grievance. When a Hittite king or an Amorite chieftain wanted to finalize a treaty, or when two warring tribes decided to form a lasting alliance, they did not reach for ink to secure the deal. They reached for a blade. In a brutal, unforgiving landscape, you could not simply take a man at his word. If your survival depended on another tribe fighting beside you against an invading army, or supplying water from their wells during a severe drought, a broken promise usually meant a slaughtered village. You needed a guarantee that completely bypassed human fickleness. You needed a ritual so visceral, so physically terrifying, that the sheer memory of it would prevent either side from ever daring to walk away. The ancients needed a ceremony that would burn the consequences of betrayal into the retinas and the nostrils of every person watching. They had to visually demonstrate exactly what would happen to the person who broke the pact. They took a living animal, representing themselves, and they destroyed it. The smell of the iron in the fresh blood, the sound of the flies that swoop down from the darkening sky. He is trembling, he is exhausted, and he is waiting for God to, immediately gathering in the heat. It was all designed to communicate a single, undeniable message. Let this be done to me if I fail you. It was physical theater that transformed a fragile spoken promise into a fatal, unbreakable oath. When you read Genesis chapter 15, you are watching the creator of the universe stoop down to participate in this exact, brutal legal rite. He is speaking to Abraham in the only contractual language the ancient world actually respected. But here is the detail hiding in plain sight. Abraham is not the one who suggests this horrifying custom. God asks for the carcasses. God commands the slaughter. God sets the stage for the ritual. Abram simply obeys. He brings the livestock. He raises the blade. He splits the heifer. He splits the goat. He splits the ram. He separates the heavy, butchered halves. He builds a crimson corridor in the sand, and then he waits. The sun drops completely below the hills. The harsh heat escapes the desert floor. The vultures finally stop their relentless circling. The air turns sharply cold. The silence grows thick. Abram sits beside the mutilated animals. His hands are sticky with dried blood. His muscles ache from fighting off the birds all afternoon. He expects a voice. He expects a blinding light. He expects the Creator to step down into the dust and speak. But God makes him wait in the dark, show up to a contract signing. The man is Abram. The scene is Genesis chapter 15. And what is happening? Genesis chapter 15. Verse 12 says, "A deep sleep falls on the patriarch." But this is not a gentle slumber. The text uses the Hebrew word tardama. It is a profound, unnatural trance. It is a paralyzing weight. It is the exact same word used in Genesis chapter 2, when God puts Adam into a deep coma to rip a rib from his chest. Abram is completely immobilized. He cannot move his arms. He cannot stand up. He cannot fight back. He can only feel. And what he feels is absolute terror. The text says, "A dreadful and great darkness suddenly falls upon him." The Hebrew word for dread here is ima. It means a shuddering fear. a bone-deep panic. It is the kind of sheer terror that makes your chest tight and your jaw lock. The kind of dread that completely steals your breath. He is trapped in the pitch black. He is surrounded by the heavy, metallic smell of dead flesh. He is pinned to the freezing dirt. This is not a peaceful encounter with the divine. It is a terrifying submission to absolute power. He is completely helpless. He cannot negotiate terms. He cannot suggest an alternative arrangement. He cannot advocate for himself. He is a paralyzed man, lying beside a narrow aisle of slaughtered livestock, waiting for a holy god to arrive and finalize a deadly pact. And it is right here, in the crushing, terrifying, dark, that the language suddenly shifts. On the ground in front of him is one of the most violent, graphic, and misunderstood moments in the entire biblical narrative. It is right here, in verse 18, that the biblical text uses a specific phrase to describe exactly what God is doing. It is a phrase that has been smoothed over and sanitized by our modern English translations. But the literal Hebrew is holding a knife. Look at Genesis chapter 15, verse 18. Your English translation probably reads something like this: "On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram." It sounds clean. It sounds safe. It sounds like two civilized dignitaries shaking hands over a polished mahogany table. But the English word made completely masks the violence of the original language. The Hebrew verb used here is karet, and the noun for covenant is berith. The root of karet does not mean to make, to form, or to construct. It means to cut, to sever, to strike a heavy, physical blow that divides something in half. It is the exact same verb used elsewhere in the Hebrew text for a lumberjack, swinging an iron axe to chop down a thick cedar tree. It is the exact same word used for a soldier decapitating an enemy on the battlefield. You do not make a biblical covenant. You cut it. If feeling the raw, unfiltered weight of the original language is stirring up something inside you, you are exactly who this channel is for. Drop a comment and hit subscribe, because every week we dig past. He has taken a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon, the sanitized translations to find the awe hiding underneath. So the phrase karat berith demands a physical action. The word berith itself only deepens the weight. While scholars debate its exact origins, many believe it derives from an ancient Akkadian root, meaning to fetter or to chain. It implies a binding that restricts movement, a bond that cannot simply be slipped off when it becomes inconvenient. When you put the two words together, you get a violent paradox. You are cutting something in order to bind it permanently. This etymology changes everything about how we understand our relationship with the divine. A covenant is not a legal document you sign. It is a bloody reality you step into. To cut a covenant in the ancient Near East meant you physically divided an animal and walked between the severed pieces. The ritual was known in antiquity as the Oath of the Pieces. The two parties making the treaty would stand at opposite ends of the blood-soaked dirt. They would look each other in the eye, and they would slowly walk toward the center, passing directly between the ribbed, fleshy walls of the slaughtered livestock. They were making a self-maledictory oath. They were publicly declaring, "If I ever break my end of this agreement, if I ever fail to uphold my word, let my body be hacked apart." He has taken a heavy blade and split the 3 large animals right down the middle, slicing through bone and sinew, exactly like these animals. "And let my blood soak the ground." There were no appellate courts. There was no renegotiation. There was only the blade. It was an absolute surrender of your right to live if you failed to perform your obligations. It was the highest, most terrifying form of commitment a human being could make. But to fully grasp what paralyzed Abram is about to witness in the dark, you have to understand how fiercely God enforces this specific ritual. You have to look at what happens centuries later, when a rebellious nation decides to perform this exact same ceremony and assumes they can walk away. Babylonian siege ramps press against the heavy stone walls of Jerusalem. Starvation haunts the narrow streets. The city is suffocating. King Zedekiah panics. The wealthy elites of Judah grow desperate. They need a miracle. They need divine intervention to survive the winter. So they bring out the livestock. They swing the blade. They cleave the bone. They drag the bloody halves across the dirt. The princes of Judah, the priests, and the wealthy landowners line up. They step into the crimson aisle. They walk between the severed pieces of flesh. They cut a covenant. They vow to free every Hebrew slave in the city, hoping the act of obedience will force God to save them, and the ritual seems to work. The Babylonian army hears a rumor of an approaching Egyptian force. They pack up their tents, laying the bloody halves directly opposite each other on the dirt. He has meticulously created a narrow, crimson aisle of. They pull back from the walls. They march away. The Zig lifts. The iron gates of Jerusalem swing open. The panic evaporates. The wealthy elites look out at their vast, untended fields. They look at the freedmen walking away with their families. They change their minds. They hunt the men down. They drag them back. They lock the iron shackles back around their wrists. The elites assume the oath was temporary. They assume the crisis is over. They are wrong. God speaks through the prophet Jeremiah. You find the terrifying verdict in Jeremiah chapter 34. Verse 18. God does not issue a fine. God does not send a legal warning. He points directly back to the butchered livestock. He says to them, "The men who have transgressed my covenant, who have not kept the words of the covenant which they made before me, when they cut the calf in two and pass between its parts, I will give them into the hand of their enemies." He promises their dead bodies will become food for the vultures of the sky and the beasts of the earth. The severed calf was not a symbol. It was a sentence. They invoked the ancient curse. They walked the bloody aisle. They broke their word.